Amidst the chaos of life, there are often moments of profound familiarity that transcend the ordinary. It's that sudden, unexplainable sensation that you've been here before, that you've lived this moment already. You felt it before, haven't you? Déjà vu. The glitch in the matrix of our reality. It's a whisper in the back of your mind, a flicker of recognition that defies all explanation. Just like Neo in the Matrix, who experienced déjà vu in the form of a black cat as a signal that the fabric of his reality was being altered by unseen forces. But what if déjà vu is more than just a trick of the mind? What if it's a portal to something greater, something beyond our comprehension? This is Bright Lights Beyond. Synchronicities.
OMG, girl. All I can say is yes.
Yes, that's all I need.
Right? I love the reference to the Matrix, girl. Like, I feel like in pop culture, deja vu is referenced like so many times, but it's never really like called deja vu. But I love how it's like the glitch in the Matrix. Another movie I love that is like totally deja vu, but I feel like even deeper is Groundhog's Day. First of all, I love that movie because Bill Murray, hilarious. But that's also like the biggest deja vu, I want to say, ever.
Well, and when I was looking up examples of deja vu in pop culture and movies, Groundhog Day kept coming up. And I read the line that made me laugh where he asks, I think it's, the bed and breakfast owner. And he's like, have you ever had deja vu? And she's like, I'm not sure. Let me see if it's on the menu. And I was like, that's so funny. Like, who doesn't know what deja vu is? But also like, that's hilarious. It does sound like some sort of like French food. Honestly, I would eat it.
Yeah, I'm like, I'll take 2 deja vus, please, and a side of whipped cream. So, with all this talk of deja vu, what in the heck is deja vu?
I know what deja vu is. I feel like I've felt it, but Lexie, can you put it into concrete terms for us? Give us a refresher course. Deja vu 101, why don't you?
Yeah, like a crash course, a history, but like deja vu. Okay, you got it. I'm gonna do my best John Green impression. Okay, so what is deja vu? So, déjà vu is French for already seen. The term was coined by the French parapsychologist Émile Barac in 1876, and it is described as the feeling of having already experienced the present situation or tedious familiarity. Now, originally, when Emile was looking into deja vu, he was looking at it through the lens of parapsychology, so mainly dealing in the spiritual elements. And it was said to be thought of as past life memories, or even like memories that are repressed either from trauma, the government, hypnosis, or even alien abductions. But since 1876, when this term was coined, science has had a hand in kind of shaping some theories around what deja vu might be. So, what's really cool and kind of something that we've learned even from past episodes is that science can kind of give us an example or point us in the right direction, but there's not a solid, this is exactly what it is. Much like near-death experiences, science can't completely replicate it, so it can't really do all of the prognosis on what it really is. And that's what makes deja vu so interesting, and I guess I want to say almost like unsettling, is because there's not a solid, concrete answer as to what it is. So let's get into some, I guess, fun facts about deja vu. So first of all, deja vu has been experienced by at least 30% of the entire population worldwide. And that's just a guesstimate. People really believe that deja vu has been experienced to upwards of 60 to 80% of people. And that's a lot of people. And it's hard pressed to find someone who has never really experienced the sensation of a deja vu. What's really cool is that deja vu is most common in the age ranges of 15 to 25. And that is really when your frontal cortex is starting to really develop. And at 25, it said that your frontal lobe is completely developed. So it's very interesting that deja vu is found most commonly in people from 15 to 25. What's even more interesting is that studies have shown that deja vu really starts to show up in children from ages 6 to 10, which is so cool. And, you know, just to kind of deviate from, I guess, the facts here, when I was growing up, I used to get deja vu a lot. I never called it deja vu. I would just say, guys, I'm having a flashback. And it's so funny because I asked my mom about it and she was like, yeah, I used to say that a lot. And I was like, it was just deja vu. But I remember as a young kid having it often. Now, in the spiritual context, people believe that deja vu is a product of the functional mind, meaning that it serves a functional role in, I guess, the greater life cosmos. That can mean that it's like a casual relationship brought on by a mental state, sensory inputs, or behavioral outputs. That leads to the invokement of a higher being on like the right path. Now, scientifically, researchers researchers believe that it has something to do with the way memories are stored in the temporal lobe, not the hippocampus. And it's funny if you're listening to this and you know me because you're like, what does Lexie really know about science? But I did do the research. So it is actually true that the hippocampus stores most of our memories. But in research that they've done with deja vu, people who have experienced it and have undergone scientific testing, they find that it's really the neurons in our temporal lobe are what's firing off reactions. And that is our decision-making area, which is in stark contrast to people who believe it's like a memory recall, if that makes sense. What's also really cool in looking into deja vu, people who suffer from epilepsy tend to have a lot more experiences with deja vu because it's occurring in our temporal lobe. And sometimes it's a warning sign to the people who suffer from epilepsy that you're about to have a seizure. Science also believes that it could be a short circuiting of the neurons going from the short-term memory to the long-term memory, and it's like some kind of mix-up with our neural pathways. And it can be triggered by things like smell or a pattern, and it can be related to decision-making. So I guess to deviate again, when I used to say like I have a flashback or whatever, I would always be concerned that I would be picking the exact way that I saw it happening in my mind's eye. And what's really interesting is that the science kind of really backs it up. Because it goes to our temporal lobe, which is very different than the hippocampus, it really means we're really trying to make a decision on whether this already happened or it's happening right now, which is actually really mind-blowing because it's related to conflict resolution. And it's really unsettling because we kind of know very little about it other than what research they've done. And like I said, it can't be really replicated like that, you know?
Lexie, I think not only did you have a past life for sure, but in your past life, you were a brain scientist because you are slaying the research on this. And I feel like you always, in every episode, you do the heavy lifting when it comes to the science behind these terms. So I think in a past life, you were a woman in STEM for sure.
Well, thank you. Well, I also will say like I was an AP bio, and that counts for something.
It's carried you this far, and look at you now, girl.
Thank you. Thank you. So I guess deja vu is kind of a catch-all term for unexpected familiarities. But what's really cool is that there's different type of deja vu. And I'm so glad that you said that I did good in the previous section because I'm about to butcher some French. So let's all buckle up. And if you're a French scholar or my mom, don't listen. Or if you listen, have some grace. So what's really cool is there are different types of deja vu. So you have the normal deja vu, which is, like I said, the catch-all term. And then you have déjà entendu, which means, have I heard this before? You have déjà passé, which is, have I thought this before? You have déjà goûté, which is, have I eaten this before? And déjà voulez-vous, which is, have I desired this thing or person before? And what's really cool is that people who travel experience deja vu at the same rate people who have epilepsy because they've been in so many different surroundings in so many circumstances that they themselves can't know if this is like an imagined remembering or if they're actually been there before. And a lot of this has to do with dual processing and just the way that we divide our attention nowadays. But I do believe that deja vu does have spiritual elements. For example, before I started this podcast, I was briefly mentioning to my mom, and I was honestly trying to get the French pronunciation of these words because my mom speaks a little bit of French. And my mom was telling me that my grandpa actually one time told her that he believes that if we can inherit things like eye color or like hair or, you know, a cowlick, that maybe we can inherit memories from past lives or different relatives. And so I just gotta say shout out Grandpa Mike because honestly that could be true. But that's all I know about deja vu in like the term, the science, the metaphysical. And shout out Emile Barak, or if that's how you even say your name because you're French too, I don't know.
Hey, I said you were a brain scientist, not a French brain scientist in a past life. So there's some leniency there. But in all actuality, you did really good. Better than I thought you would. You set our expectations low, so I'm pleasantly surprised.
Wait, how do I say it? Merci beaucoup?
She's been watching Beauty and the Beast, Miss Candelabra. But, you know, Lexie, you slayed the French pronunciation and gave us a really great overview of what deja vu is. It's really interesting to me that it's actually backed by research. Like people are studying this, although they can't really, you know, maybe research it as much as they would like to. I love that we have like the scientific evidence behind it, that it's a real thing that people experience. And I can't imagine being one of the people who doesn't experience it. Like I feel like I've had such vivid moments of deja vu. And yeah, I feel bad for the 80 to 20% of people who aren't having deja vu because it's kind of fun out here.
It's fun being delusional and really not knowing whether or not this was real or not. I love it.
Exactly. And so Lexie, like I said, gave us a great overview overview, but I'm going to kind of dig into more about how does déjà vu correlate to synchronicities, which is obviously the theme of this season, what we've been exploring for the past 5 episodes, and now we're wrapping up in this episode. So déjà vu and synchronicities are kind of both phenomena that involve a sense of meaningful coincidence or familiarity. Like we were just talking about, that sense that, I've been here before, I've done this before, I've desired this person before. While déjà vu typically involves the feeling of having experienced something before, synchronicities are, as we've talked about, those meaningful coincidences that occur without any apparent causal connection. And despite their different manifestations, to me at least, both of these experiences suggest a deeper interconnectedness in the fabric of our reality. Both déjà vu and synchronicities often occur at really pivotal moments in people's lives. And I feel like that's something we've been exploring all season, whether it's a déjà vu experience preceding a significant event or a synchronicity occurring during a moment of a decision or reflection. These phenomena often carry a lot of significance for people and can prompt them to either kind of pause and consider the underlying meaning, or maybe it's a moment they didn't even realize was significant that now kind of carries that weight for them.
Wow, that's really interesting and makes a lot of sense, actually. I wonder how that relates to our consciousness and our subconsciousness.
So that is a great question, Lexie. And luckily for you and our listeners, I have the answer. To get a little bit technical about it, at the forefront of our minds lies our conscious awareness. So that's the state in which we perceive and interact with the world around us. When we're driving, our consciousness tells us, hey, this is a red light, stop. This is a green light, go. All that jazz. So in this state, we're really aware of our thoughts, our feelings, our surroundings. We're actively taking in that information, processing it, and making decisions based on our perceptions and also our beliefs. Beneath the surface of this conscious awareness lies the subconscious mind. So here our thoughts, memories, and emotions reside, often operating beyond our conscious control. So while we may not be aware of its workings, the subconscious mind exerts a really powerful influence on our thoughts, which then kind of, make our realities and our behaviors. So it's all connected. And these kind of shape our experiences in subtle yet profound ways. And to tie it back into déjà vu, also along with synchronicities, it can be seen as moments when the boundaries between the conscious and subconscious awareness and minds kind of blur and almost merge a little bit, allowing us to glimpse parts of our reality that lie beyond our everyday perception. In these moments, we might experience a heightened sense of connection to the universe, to someone else, to the situation, to that moment, whatever it may be, that kind of helps us tap into those deeper layers of consciousness that transcend our individual selves. So to me, déjà vu and synchronicities as a whole not only represent, like I said, interconnectedness between the universe, but also interconnectedness within our own minds to those parts that we're not super aware of, the subconscious mind that obviously operates on a daily basis, but we don't really take into consideration, which I thought was really cool. All of this is connected, and I feel like we've talked about that all season, so I love it.
And I feel like furthermore on that within our own selves is the perception, where if we can perceive something to be a certain way, then that kind of shapes the reality of which it does live in,
No, absolutely. And that brings me to my next point, which is kind of talking about how perception shapes our reality. I feel like we've heard that a lot, maybe in those, grind set podcasts we listen to where they're like, your perception shapes your reality. And not to say they're right, but they kind of snapped with that. So I wanted to kind of talk about how perception isn't this, passive process that I feel like a lot of people think about, like, oh, I'm perceiving something. It's kind of just going through the conscious mind, maybe into the subconscious, whatever. It's actually a really active interpretation of sensory information. Again, it's our surroundings, what we're touching, feeling, seeing. Our brains are constantly processing and interpreting incoming stimuli, filtering them through our beliefs, experiences, and cultural conditioning. As a result, our perception of reality is inherently subjective, shaped by our individual perspectives and biases. It's like how people say there's two sides to every story. And, you might be like, well, my side is the right side. And even if that is true, the other person has a different perception and therefore their reality is different. And I feel like we will, unfortunately, maybe never know objective reality because as humans, we all have have those beliefs and the way we're raised and all of that kind of influence how we kind of process reality. And what's interesting is actually psychologist Timothy Leary popularized the concept of the reality tunnel, which suggests that each individual operates within a unique perceptual framework or tunnel through which they view the world. This tunnel is shaped by factors such as our upbringings, our education, our cultures, like I said, where we lived, our friends, our family, all sorts of things. And that creates our subjective reality that may differ significantly from that of others. You know, bringing it back to synchronicities, we've said over and over, like two people could experience the same thing. And to one person, it's a synchronicity. To one person, it's not. Or to one person, it's a synchronicity and a sign that they should do that. To another person, it's a sign they shouldn't do that. And I feel like perception and intuition all play into synchronicities and also déjà vu. And from my research, I feel like déjà vu can kind of be seen as a manifestation of our individual reality tunnels or perceptual frameworks through which we view the world. Our personal interpretations of déjà vu are kind of shaped by those factors I just talked about, how we were raised, where we lived, and even past experiences, maybe past experiences that we weren't even alive for, to kind of get into the whole past lives thing. And they kind of create this subjective reality that may, like I said, differ from one person to another.
That is so true. And I feel like when you experience something, I guess, like, I don't know, I want to call it magical as deja vu or something as profound, or even if it is the neurons just mixing the short term, long term, or the decision making process out of the hippocampus, blah, blah, blah. Even if it is that, I think it's important that we take stock in like why it's happening at this exact moment. So some of the things you can do if you experience deja vu, and this is if you want to kind of learn more maybe about why it's happening or just, get a better sense of what it could be, is first of all, this could be a warning sign to a seizure. So be careful because that is true. Second of all, I would say keep a journal. Keep a journal of all the things, just like we talked about in every episode. Journal about what you're seeing and feeling, the synchronicities in your life, but especially make note about your deja vu. Also reflect on what the trigger could have been. Was it a smell? Was it a pattern? Did you hear something? Did you see someone? Discuss it with other people. That could be really fun and important. Like, hey, I just had this crazy deja vu. I know when I had my quote unquote flashbacks, I would always tell my mom, I'm like, I've seen this before. And she's like, okay, girl. And then lastly, explore mindful practices, kind of like, keeping a journal. That's a practice, put yourself in that realm and really kind of look for things and take stock of what your deja vu was. And did you really have this? Have you been here before? Or was this just like a mix up in the neurons, just kind of reflect on it. Cause I feel like it matters that you had it. So might as well look into why and all that jazz. So that kind of leads me back to, I guess, this season, just kind of like taking stock about the synchronicities in your life. And I kind of want to go back to episode 1. If we can remember scarabs and synchronicities and the fun of everything that was, I love how that was our intro to Carl Jung and the possibilities of the subconscious and the consciousness working together to reveal like universal truths about ourselves and about, I guess, the universe at large.
I love that because it's all tied back to where we started the season. Every episode we've tied it back. And without that first episode, we wouldn't have been connected with our man, Carl Jung.
Carl.
Who we reference all the time.
He is like, he's the man. He's the guy.
That kind of brings me into episode 2, where we talked about fate lines and family ties, which was a really fun episode for me because it made me think like, I looked at my family tree and tried to see if there were any synchronicities, throughout there. I hope some of our listeners were really inspired to kind of see if there were connections between generations. And I like how we talked about, synchronicities can be kind of throughout space and time. It was kind of a hard concept maybe to wrap our minds around, but it really solidified and locked into place for me in that episode. And how, like you just said, like maybe memories can be passed through generations and things like that. Maybe synchronicities can be too. And that's kind of what I left that episode with, at least for me.
Totally. And I think that kind of leads brilliantly into episode 3, where we talk to Peyton and the signs and the spirit guides and just kind of like our guardian angels, because I loved hearing about like his experiences with signs and his life and just how one person's story relates to 100 different symbols that can mean 100 different things to different people. And I really loved how the sentiment with all the signs is to like look deeper into the things that we see in our own lives. Like for Peyton, it was cardinals and numbers. And I don't know, I just found that was a really great way to like kind of like provoke us to look deeper.
And also, bringing back the family aspect, like Peyton talked a lot about, like you just said, the cardinals and how those were a kind of sign that was passed down, like he said, almost like a synchronicity throughout his family. So it tied into episode 2 into perfectly.
Absolutely. And that kind of reminds me of, episode 4, when we learned about ancient Norse culture and how ruins and rituals that happened in 500 BC is still something that we could practice and we still see passed down through generations by stories and by synchronicities, and how it still plays a role in today's actions. Asking for guidance, whether it's through manifestation or even a ritual, or just looking back at ancient practices and trying to find answers everywhere. And that kind of goes into synchronicities and signs. It's we're looking for a greater answer, whether it's from God, whether it's from our spirit guide or the universe. And it just kind of reminds everyone that there's such a thread tying everyone together.
Absolutely. And when you talked about, looking for guidance, that kind of made me think of our latest episode, which was with Pamela, all about dream interpretation and decipherment. And I mean, talk about asking for guidance. She gave us such great guidance in that episode on kind of learning our nighttime language and translating into our daytime language. And like I said, I left that episode feeling super inspired to dig into my own dreams. And I really love how she continuously talked about that snake metaphor and how it can be so different in one person's dream as compared to another. Maybe they love snakes, maybe someone else hates snakes, and it means something totally different when they're dreaming.
And like dreams, I think that what's really cool about it is that everyone's dreamed before, whether it's you have dreams all the time or it happens once in a blue moon. It's so universal. Everyone has dreams, and just looking into, I guess, what it means to you is profound. And that's kind of what synchronicities are at the end of the day,
Absolutely. And they're such a personal experience, but I really hope this season has not only inspired people to think about past synchronicities, but maybe open them up to future synchronicities. I know I myself have already noticed things, even just when I'm out walking my dogs or whatever, tell my fiance, that's a synchronicity. This is a sign. This is deja vu. He's heard it all before, and I've even had people texting me being I just had this crazy sign. I just felt this crazy moment of intuition. And I'm just so happy that we could kind of cover this topic, try to do it justice, try to dig into maybe some areas that not a lot of other people have explored. I know I've definitely learned a lot.
Absolutely. And kind of to finish it, or to give it the denouement, which is the finale in a way. That's another French word, by the way, 10 points if you knew that and if you knew what it meant, but I'll tell you it's finale. With this kind of overarching theme of synchronicities and how the fabric of life is kind of woven together through things like deja vu and through things like dreams and families and signs and scarabs, all these different things, that there is an overarching universal truths of life. And if we can kind of get a grip or kind of understand what life means to us, does that make life more fulfilled and worth living in a way? And I just feel that this is why, to me, this season has been so profound and cool, and so lucky that I get to share it with you, Andie, and all our listeners and everyone who supported us. So thank you guys so much for, coming along this journey. And hopefully you learned a little bit about yourself and your own universal truths. And then, hopefully you subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify and Apple Podcasts and everything. But yeah.
Just to wrap things up, I feel the very definition of being a human is just trying to find meaning, not just in life, but in those small everyday moments that to someone else might not seem super significant, but to us, it, means the world. And more than just the theme of synchronicities, I feel that's been a universal message in every episode, is just finding those little moments of meaning that make life, really worth living, and how we connect with one another. And if you have any more stories of synchronicities, we would still love to hear them, even though we're wrapping up the finale, but we're always wanting to hear your stories. And Lexie, it has been a true pleasure and an honor to be your co-host. It's been so much fun. I have loved podcasting, and who knows when you guys might see me again, but maybe if we get enough subscribers on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, likes, follows, all that jazz, maybe Lexie will want to bring me back for another season. We'll have to see if I pass the test, but you guys let me know.
Yeah, Andie's fate on this show is up to you. So if you don't subscribe, or follow us, Andie's out of a job. That's just the truth.
I'm gonna get cut, y'all.
You are the weakest link. Goodbye. But yes, guys, thank you so much for everything. Be on the lookout for any updates from us. And remember, it's always good to go back and listen to every episode, from the beginning. Episode 1, season 1, episode 3, season 2. Who knows? Just go ahead and listen to all of them while we're on our hiatus. And we'll be back, hopefully. And hopefully Andie will be back, but that's in your hands. But if there's anything you want to share with the people, Andie, any special shout outs or anything that you're doing in the meantime while we're on this hiatus?
I do want to say that I'm fostering the sweetest little puppy named Clara, and she could really use a forever home. So if anyone out there is listening who really wants the cutest little sweetest dog, she's available for adoption. So hit me up because, as much as I love her, we want to find her a forever home. Other than that, I'm sure I'll be seeing you around, Lexie. I'll be bothering you to hang out and all that good stuff. But yeah, no, I had so much fun. I already miss it. And I'm going to be getting my Bright Lights Beyond fix by listening to this season and your past seasons. In the meantime, what about you, Lexie? What are you going to be doing?
Ooh, good question. So right now, my production company, House of Bug, is working on their second documentary about the Wild Mile in Chicago, and that should be coming up sometime in the summer. So be sure to follow that at House of Bug on Instagram. We have a website. I would love for you guys to follow that. And as always, if you want to go back and watch my other documentary about ufology and UFOs, it's called Keep Your Eye on the Sky, and that'll be linked in the bio too. And I'll also be sure to link the shelter and the information you need if you want Clara, and maybe she'll be your new Synchronicities buddy. Who knows? But again, from the bottom of my heart, and I know Andie's heart too, thank you so much for following us. And you guys, as always, live life beyond.